There's actually 3 milestones. You got to know how all this works. If you still have a lot of questions, if you're not really clear in your brain on what's going out, when do we get the deed? When do we lease the property? What do we do when they have a lot of equity? What kind of properties might we want to wholesale? You get to a point where you know how it all works. And if you don't, go back into the training or make a list of questions and let me help you. But we got to know how it works. Now that is never enough, right? It's never enough. Just knowing how to do something isn't enough to be able to bring somebody on board with you. There's an element of being able to articulate the concepts in a way that will help other people understand. That's why I don't just spend time on what to do. We spend a lot of time. Like half of the training is about what to say, how to approach the seller. How do we answer this question and that? That's why we have the app. That's why we have the rehearsal app that you can go through in written form, oral form, in video form, so that you can go through that and really be aligned with what I know works, because I wrote those scripts and I've made a lot of deals using that line of speaking. It doesn't mean you have to follow it word for word, but why not try to follow it as close to word for word as possible until you've made enough money that you can kind of adapt, if you want, to your own style, because we know it works. Now, if you have a different personality than me, a lot of people, some people have like a little bit different way of speaking, so to speak. So you might have to make some adaptations earlier if the way that I speak in there is not something that you're totally comfortable with, but you can easily do it. Just take the concepts and change it into your own words if you have to. Or check with me, because there are certain words that I don't want you to change. Knowing what to say is really important. You got to know how it works and you got to know what to say. So I'm giving you a 30,000 foot view here, right? Now, how do you go about accomplishing level 1, knowing how it works, accomplishing level 2, knowing what to say, and accomplishing level 3, which is to begin making deals? Well, this is the way it works. I found this in just about every field of study. You got to learn at your own pace. You need to learn all of the material in this manual. I know it's a lot of slides, but there's not that much content on each slide. If you boiled this down to like a book, probably wouldn't be more than 100 pages, right? So you can all do this, but it ain't going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a week. At least give it what a realtor would give getting their realtor license, which is, 60 to 90 hours or whatever, depending on what state you're in. Think about it like taking a class in school, at college or something. Think of it like a semester of school. Now, I don't know if everybody's like me in this sense. I don't have a hard time learning things like the first time, but I sometimes have a little bit of difficulty retaining it unless I'm exposed to it a second, third, fourth time. That's why I can never remember the names of actors, actresses, movies, lines in movies. When I see it, like right after the movie, I'm like, oh, that was so funny, that was so great, that was the greatest scene. And then I'll just like a few days later, I'll just totally forget. I definitely am the type of person that needs to go through things a couple, 2, 3 times before I understand it. Now I realize that compromises your speed to making money when you are just reinforcing. But most of the time I found that it works really well at getting you to an expert level or a good enough level. You think Steph Curry, how many shots does he take a day? Probably thousands shots. You have to keep doing things to really pound it into your brain. It's not like, okay, I learned to shoot and now I just know how to do it. It's going to take some practice. And the way you practice learning is by, maybe listening to something a couple, 2, 3 times. You're all trying to get a system that'll help you make money, and I don't know of anything that compares to this. If you don't understand it, that mitigates your ability to do it, so you should ask questions, right? The point is that these concepts, they crystallize with repetition. Almost all concepts crystallize to a great degree with more repetition. Your jump shot crystallizes into a swoosh, right? With more repetition. I'm not going to harp on this because I've been harping on it for, throughout all of these different slides that we've talked about. Folks, if you're going to do this for a career, if you're going to do this to build wealth, if you're already, super wealthy, you can just have realtors on your team or just pay somebody that you're related to go get the license, right? That's basically what I do because I don't want to go get the license, because I can just pay somebody to do it on my team and then use it that way and basically insulate myself from some of the downsides of having it that we've talked about. But if I was an individual investor just starting out with this, I would definitely get a realtor license. The values of these houses are so much greater than when I started. It's just like NBA basketball players. I was listening to Charles Barkley on Club Shay Shay with Shannon Sharp. Charles Barkley said they offered him, coming out of Auburn, they offered him a 1-year deal for $75,000. Barkley's like my age, maybe a couple years older, right? He ended up getting a contract. But remember, he's one of the best players of all time, right? He ended up getting a contract with the Sixers for, I think he said, what did he say? It was $2 million for 4 years, so about $500,000 a year. Do you know, I believe the average salary for an NBA player is like $10 million a year. That's kind of the way real estate is, right? The value of property has gone up so much that to be able to make 1, 2, and 3 points on a property, it's worth it to get that license. When I started doing this in the early 90s, a lot of the properties that I was buying, were 50,000, 60,000, 70,000. Today, those properties are 500, 600, and 700,000. So, 3% of $700,000, that puts like 21 grand on the board, right? But 3% of $70,000, that puts 2,100 on the board. And you say to yourself, do I really want to put myself through all that for 2,100 bucks? But for 21 grand, just to learn to flap your lips a little bit more on the call with the seller so that you can turn it into a listing, it's worthwhile. I think everybody should do this.